Hello, friends. How's it going? It's Matt. You're listening to episode 146 of the Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast. It's the show where I try and uncover the most fascinating stories in action sports and other related endeavours. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the episode. 146. Another milestone looms. Exciting stuff, eh? If it's your first time listening, have a look at the back catalogue, the show notes for this episode at www.wearelooking.sideways.com. There's a lot of stuff on there. Hope you enjoy it. All right, this week's guest, somebody, and I know I say this a lot, I've been trying to book for literally years. I first asked him to come on the show ahead of the California trip, which was unbelievably 2 years ago now. Couldn't make that happen. Then we were going to do it last summer, at the beginning of the lockdown 1 period, as I believe it's now known. But Selema ended up being extremely busy for reasons we discussed during this conversation. Anyway, I kept plugging away and we finally made it happen at the very beginning of January 2021. And I've got to say, it was really worth the wait. This is just a great chat with one of the most switched on people in action sports, as you'll know if you follow Selema on Instagram. If you don't know him, he's a presenter, a broadcaster, announcer, podcaster, musician, the list goes on. He's also just a brilliant mind, which is really on display in this free-flowing and hugely enjoyable conversation. I talked a lot at the end of the last episode about what I'm looking for in a guest, which did provoke a bit of debate after that one. And yeah, this one with Selema really hit the sweet spot. One thing I'm going to say before we get into it, well, actually, two things I'm going to say before we get into it. We had a bit of a mic situ, so Selema ended up recording his side of the conversation using his laptop mic, but it still worked. It's all good. And then we recorded this 2 days before the Capitol Hill riot, which instantly made a lot of the things we spoke about a little bit out of date, notably the section where we kind of jokingly discussed the idea of a civil war being imminent in the States. Yeah, it's that kind of chat. Anyway, then the events of January the 6th happened. So I followed up by asking Selema to record me a few thoughts as a postscript, which he kindly did and which I've tacked on to the end of the episode just before Housekeeping Corner. So make sure you keep an ear out for that one. I'll be back at the end with more of the usual Housekeeping Corner business, or HKC, as some diehards have started to call it. But in the meantime, here's me and Selema. Enjoy. It's the shed. It's the lockdown shed. Everyone's always like, "You're in a sauna," and I've had the heater on. I've had the heater on for a while, so it's feeling a bit like a sauna. No, but it's literally just the shed. It was the classic, like me and my wife, when it became obvious I was going to have to work from home for the rest of the year, and I do a lot of these, a lot of Zoom calls, as you probably have been doing this year. And we just thought, yeah, let's sort the shed out. So I've got a little day bed in here, little fridge, little desk, bookshelf. Yeah, it's worked out all right. I mean, that was in the middle of summer, so obviously now it's the 4th of January and probably -2 outside. So I had to get a heater from somewhere pretty quickly. But yeah, man, it's working out all right. Nice to mix it up, isn't it? When you're working, from like, it's either this or my bedroom the whole time. So I kind of switched between the two.
You know what's funny is that, like, I remember when this thing started and it was like, oh, well, it'll be like 6 weeks, 8 weeks tops, maybe 3 months, and we'll get back to it. And it came from such an ignorant place of like no comprehension at all of how infectious disease works and human spread and what it means for something to land, become a part of us, and then leave. And to be where we are now, like you said, January 4th, from March 13th, which is when I think it was a Friday. I think that there was a Friday the 13th, that March 13th. And I came home from being on the road for like 6 weeks and just everything shut down. And it's so strange. What a strange deal. And here we are. We're going right back into like another championship round of the thing.
Yeah, I think we've got. I mean, I'm expecting this will last over here now till the end of March. I would have thought. Um, yeah, and it's funny you say that about the fact that we were all so ignorant about what it actually meant, because obviously there are people around who aren't ignorant about it, who've spent their lives like studying these things, and it's been like that perfect storm, hasn't it, of like this a hugely complicated situation that's affecting everybody's lives, and the age of like, we don't want to trust experts, we don't give a shit, we're just gonna like do our thing, and like, the age of the instant expert, let's put it that way, especially on social media. And it's been like, even just as one example, like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, so we started rolling out the vaccine here, and Tony Blair pops up, as he often does, and started talking about how they should stagger the gap between the vaccines. They should inject more people on the first wave, so that more people get a lower amount of immunity, if that makes sense. Um, and obviously that was a huge thing because there's all this like anti-vax stuff as well. But everyone's like, "What? Like, why is he saying that? Like, he can't just say that." And then obviously it transpires that his foundation has been involved with vaccination projects for years. It's actually quite a well-known thing that people that sometimes they do recommend that. And now our government has actually said they're going to do that. But it's just one of those examples of an issue where hugely complicated, massive field, experts studying it for years. No one's got a clue, but everybody's like, well, you can't do that. Like, that doesn't feel right to me. And it's almost been, you know, the perfect example of that modern tendency, hasn't it?
I mean, the greatest gift of the internet is that everybody got a voice. The greatest curse of the internet is that everybody got a voice. And here we are now trying to figure out what that means as I mean, you can legitimately walk around and say that you're a flat earther and people will be like, "Okay, well that's an opinion you're entitled to." As opposed to, "What the fuck, what the fuck are you talking about?" Like, no, but that's just how, that person is allowed to think. They've earned that right. Like, oh, okay. I had a friend yesterday, someone who's dear to me. He called me and he said, you know, he's someone who can get caught into the pull of conspiracy and like alternative theory to the point where he doesn't trust fact at all, and he just wants to like pick out bits of what might be true in all these things that people are talking about. And I said to him, I said, "Do you hear yourself? Like, nothing that you're saying now has anything to do with where we're actually at." And he said, "Well, it's not. That's not really what it is." I said, "It is what it is." I said, "Because now you're speaking strictly from a place of fantasy and idea." And I said, "Are we gonna implement all these little bits and pieces of what you've just discussed that are noble, but that don't have any, like, they're not rooted in anything? Are we gonna make that the thing that we run on for 350 million people?" He was saying to me that his mom is 71 years old, and she said to him, "Well, if I I'm not going, I've made the decision that I'm not going to get to the virus because I'm healthy. And if I do get the virus, then I'm going to survive." And he's like, "Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that powerful?" I said, "Yes, positive mental attitude and self belief and vibrating at a place of health and doing all the things to like foster that. Yes, but you're saying that that should be our national policy and that everyone should get back to their lives if they only believe that they're not going to get the thing. And at the same time, you're saying to me, people who are over 65 years of age should probably not leave the house.
Yeah, it's not a strategy.
No, it's a feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love for that to be true, but that's not a fucking strategy. And I feel like I don't know about you, but in the beginning of this, there was this very brief period where everyone stopped and pressed pause. We were no longer in the rat race because the rat race no longer exists, and everyone got woken up to like some real truths about themselves that they had either conveniently been avoiding or weren't aware of, that this time forced them to have to take real root in. And people started building sort of real community and reaching out to those that they hadn't been and engaging in self-reflection. And it felt like empathy might be making a comeback
Yeah, for about a week.
for about a week, right? And then a bunch of people said, well, you know, we got to get back to what we were. And people were like, yeah, what was I thinking about how I feel and who I am? I want to get back to what life was. And it's like a two sets of it feels like people just said, I'm going to be amongst the group who's trying to get back to where we were or what things were. And then there's another group who are like, I'm just going to be right here and where I'm at. Like, that's all I can do. And then there's another group who's like, strictly in the future. And that's kind of what it feels like. Um, and all those forces are all like trying to win the game.
Yeah, there was a moment where you felt, obviously in hindsight, extremely naively, particularly in this country, because they were actually, for a few weeks there, they were pretty visionary quite early on. With the income scheme they brought in for people to protect jobs. They did bring in these like fairly seismic policies that had never been. We'd had nothing like that in years, like ever in history in this country. And you did think, like, because obviously the thing about this situation is it's been almost like designed to reveal every fault line in your society and system of government and economy, hasn't it? I mean, it couldn't have been more perfectly designed to do that. Any issue that you've got baked in has come out this year, hasn't it? And you did think for a minute, like, maybe they're going to look at this. maybe rampant, you know, globalized capitalism isn't the best way for us all to live. And maybe that's, but yeah, that lasted about, it probably lasted a couple of months, didn't it? The idea that there might be a serious look at change. But as you say, then it just became like, no, we've got to get the economy going and fuck everyone else. And let's just get on with it, really. But a question I wanted to ask you about that, though, is the question of leadership, because we're both our countries. I think my politics are fairly obvious to listeners of this podcast, and my view is that we are cursed with the worst possible leadership at the worst possible time, because you it has been possible to show good leadership and to take populations with you. There's quite a few. New Zealand's the obvious one, but quietly a lot of countries have managed it well, and that's been down to, like, coherent, strategized central government and planning. Essentially, not being reactive, not just going, oh well, we'll do whatever the most popular decision is. Do you think that with stronger leadership there could have been a different outcome? Because obviously that's a huge debate in itself right now, isn't it?
I feel like, at least here in America, I feel like our leadership is only symptomatic of the underlying sort of essence of America. Um, Americans have been bred to feel that they are exceptional, that we are exceptional by default. Like, just waking up in this country gives you a superpower before you even leave the house. You know, being American in and of itself is a superpower. It allows you to dodge and have most things that are happening in the world have not had to apply to you. You get to watch from afar all the, for the most part, the bad things that are happening in the world. That's at least how we're taught. And also, like, here's all the rad shit that America has done and is kick ass that that you get to embody just because you live here. And so whatever our things are, you know, homelessness, the economic disparity between the rich and the poor, and the shrinking of the middle class, those are things that people have sort of been able to. It feels like ignore just because like America's just the shit. And so at the end of the day, like, yeah, we might have these things that are whatever, but we're the shit because America. So something like this comes along and says, yeah, none of that is true. But our leadership literally like embodies that. Like, you're an American, and actually even more than you're an American, you're a white Christian straight American male, and everyone else should walk in your footsteps if they want to be, if they want to be like, if they emulate you, then we're better for it. So walk tall. And so to have leadership that literally just doubled down on that, that said like, fuck the facts, we're America, go out and live your lives, feed the economy, etc. You're bigger than the, we're bigger than the disease or your freedom. Your freedom, your freedoms are bigger than any disease. That's literally like, the freedom is the vaccine, is essentially what the first 6 months of debate was here. um I don't think it helped us at all. It just fanned the flame for people who are just, it's just really easy to run to by default be like, yeah, we're America. um and it's been baffling to watch, but I yeah, I don't think we could have had it at any worse a time.
And how one thing I wonder, looking at it from the outside, though, is, you know, when will too much be too much? Though, because obviously at some point you would think that that American exceptionalism that you describe is going to be, well, I mean, that's what the whole. There's been plenty of examples in the States this year, hasn't there, of that essential myth being, you know, being not found out, but like, you can't really ignore the fact that it's only true for a certain part of American society. You know, there's been endless examples of conflict around that throughout American history, obviously, but this year it's particularly been acute. But it just seems that it just becomes more and more entrenched. Like, you know, the worse it gets, the more entrenched it gets, the more people double down. And, you know, like, you would think actually at some point it's going to be like, well, fuck me, there's nearly a million people dead here. Like, what we can, you know, or do you think it's, I guess I don't really know what I'm trying to ask you. I guess like my question is quite a big one. How sustainable is that divide? You know, is because it obviously started with the Civil War, and, you know, it's been going on ever since. Let's be honest, for the last nearly 200 years, and, you know, where can it possibly end? Like, that's what seemed, as an observer, that's what seems very alarming about what's going on in America right now. Like, I listened to Rich Roll a bit ago, and they were openly chatting about him and Adam Skolnick. They were they were using the word civil war. You know, they were saying like, wouldn't be surprised if there's another civil war at this rate. Yeah, that's a pretty horrifying thought, isn't it? Like, so
It's the most
it,
horrifying thought.
but is that is can the divide be healed? There you go. I was like, just that question to ask you 20 minutes in.
I wonder, honestly, if the divide can be healed. It I mean, the manner in which each day a certain sector of this country doubles down to say no, I mean, right now our country is literally saying like even the idea of honoring, or the greater part of the American population coming into an understanding that like, yes, you live in quote unquote the best country in the world that was also founded on like horribly evil and shitty principles and did a bunch of really bad things that still affect us today. And we need to, the idea that we accept that and that we bake that into our education system so that we can be better. For a lot of people in this country, that actually is like that. That's the most un-American thing possible. So we have people that are literally doubling down and saying like the founding fathers were perfect. Whatever mistakes were made were super small, but none of which are sustained today in society. And those are people who are bitching and complaining and are victims. And America is bigger than that. Yay, us. And it's it's weird. I never thought for sure. I didn't think that there would be a president in my lifetime who would propose like a patriotism course to be taught in schools that would diminish slavery's role. That would like paint history to the or that would like diminish the wiping out of Native Americans, or any of the number of real horrible things that like economically benefited this country. I never thought there would be a president who would say like that's what we need to teach in schools. Like when the 1619 project, like I sure as hell didn't think that when the 1619 project came out via the New York Times and had the impact that it did. I surely did not think that conservatives would get together and say, we have got to figure out a way to discredit this at the core so that people will literally be afraid of it and not even touch it, because people are getting poisoned by this truth, and we got to turn this tide around. I think one of the great things about, not even great isn't even the right word, but when the Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd um, momentum really took hold in this country in the midst of a pandemic, and people started to the far right started to see that like people who never thought about these things before suddenly were curious and willing to understand like, oh, there's some things that I weren't taught that affect who I am and who we are, and I want to learn better and do better, because I'm aware of my privilege. I didn't think that there would be like a campaign to like undermine all that, and that's really what's taken place, like an active campaign to tell people that um, they have no reason to to feel for anyone else other than themselves. Um, and that's scary. Now, I see a lot of people that are, regardless, that are doing the work, and you see allies that are doing the work, and I feel like the movement is really moving. But I never thought that there would be such a coordinated effort from our government to be like, we got to squash that.
Yeah, I was personally very naive about that. Like I sort of, when in June, when everyone was posting the black squares, and everyone in our little world was doing it, and I did an episode with a black friend of mine, and we talked about who works in the industry over here, and we had a long conversation about that. And I remember saying to him, like, I thought everyone knew about white privilege. I thought it was really obvious. Like, how can anyone deny this? How can anyone deny? And 6 months later, it's like, oh wow, fuck me. Not only people not know about it, like they're actively engaged in trying to like suppress the very notion. like, and it has been. I mean, I'm white, so like it's different for me, obviously, but it's been pretty horrifying. I mean, over here, they're like trivial example, but all the soccer players in the Premier League take a knee, now, and there's people booing it. There's in the stands, like there's white idiots in this country who haven't got a fucking clue about it, and that's obviously been in the news quite a lot. And when they're interviewing these people, they're saying like, "Well, we don't agree with the Marxist ideology of Black Lives Matter." I'm like, you don't even fucking know Karl Marx is. Like, like you literally getting that because you've read it and it's being actively put out there as like a thing when it's just obviously total bullshit. But that's what's happening.
And it's the same thing here. I love when all of a sudden people are like, you know, starts spewing about Marxism, and then you ask them like, tell me more about Uncle Carl, and they're like, well, and that's the thing. Like, if you wake up and you were born on, I get, I bet baseball reference would not work, but I guess if you wake up and you were born like, I'll use a soccer pitch as an example. If you wake up, right, and you're on offense and you're born inside the box on the pitch, right? The idea that your game suddenly needs to start from the other side of the field to make your way into the box to create opportunity to score a goal starts to feel like someone's taking something away from you. Like, what do you mean? Like, I got to start back there. Like, I was born off sides, but that doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just how things are. And here that's how people. Oh, I use the baseball analogy as like being born on third base, and you it's a short stroll home to the home plate. But the other people are literally like trying to get into the stadium to watch the game, let alone be on the field. And people can't they can't comprehend that, and the idea of others getting access and being on the same playing field starts to feel like something is literally being taken away from them, and that scares the fuck out of them. So far better to find some fake reason to think ill of equity than to be someone who wants to champion it, which is, I mean, it goes back to like the concussion of colonialism, I like to call it, like people being very much concussed as to what that was, and that we are a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, Britain, Jesus, like the whole of our wealth is built upon colonialism and slavery, and you suggest that we might want to pull the statue down, or like consider the fact that all the stately homes around the country were, from sugar plantations in the Caribbean. And suddenly everyone's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! We're not going to talk about that." Wait,
Slow down. What do you mean?
Yeah,
What do you mean there was a gulag in Kenya? Come on, that was so long ago. But back to your point about like civil war, like, do I think that people will be willing? I think a small sector of people in this country are ignorant enough that they'd be willing to to die for. I don't even consider it ideals. I don't even think they know what they would be willing that they'd be dying for. They'd be willing to die for an idea of what their version, I guess, of what America is. But gosh, like, this is a short time that we all have in these bodies roaming this earth in the midst of like infinite space in every other direction. So I'm always puzzled that anybody wants to like do anything to cut it short, um, based in conflict with others. I can see like making a mistake, having too good of a time, or the other things that we all suffer from at a mental, emotional, physical level that can cut life short. But the idea of like wanting to pick up arms and go fight for something that's not yours, in an idea that the world will look like what you want it to be for the rest of your being here, that shit is fucking crazy to me. Like I want to like I want to have enjoy my life. I want to enjoy being here. And I like to be curious about like who's next door or across the street or around the corner, or how we might be able to help those people in a manner that might aid them to have some more joy in their existence too. That's how I was raised. You know, my parents came to America from, my father came from South Africa, my mother from Haiti, both, you know, fleeing political unrest, both fleeing situations that didn't allow them to live their whole existence. And so they came here. And my dad, ironically, came, like, he left apartheid and came straight into like the beast of the civil rights, and was like, well, fuck me. um, but that's what they raised me on, you know, and they taught me to have pride for my history and what my ancestors and family had been through, but they also didn't raise me to have any sort of cultural chauvinism. You know, they raised me to have pride in where I came from, and pride in my culture, but not to think of what we come from, and what makes us us to be better than anyone else. Instead, they taught me to be extremely curious about what makes everyone else who they are, and to marvel at that, and just, you know, and want to learn more, and maybe even like learn some shit from them that can make you better. That's how I was raised. And I'm so grateful for that. And I feel so sorry for people who have been raised, taught that fear is some sort of, is pride. That fear is some sort of pride in existence. Um, and the idea of like getting to know these other people and their customs, or and what makes them who they are, won't serve you at all. It's just utterly baffling to me, and it just, it feels like a fucking waste of time, like a massive waste of existence relative to like how short a time we have here.
Where do you think they got that strength from? Because that's the thing that just struck me when you were talking. Then is like the magnanimous is the wrong word, really, but like, you know, that to have that positivity and strength to sort of have that attitude, having gone through what they presumably went through. I wouldn't obviously know the specifics, but certainly know a little bit of the history of both those countries. That takes a lot of strength, doesn't it, to sort of rise above bitterness and like you say, pride, and to communicate that to you in such a way. Like, where do you think they got that strength from to sort of keep that at the forefront?
I mean, my father especially, he loved life so much, and he was a relentlessly curious person, and he never ever could come to the idea that like the worst of a certain group of people was the definition of that group of people. He just refused to believe it. He thought, well, that's bullshit. And somehow or another, even when it came to something like apartheid, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, like, growing up before he left South Africa, he was making music with lots of white kids that wanted to make music with him, and they loved making music together, and um, they did everything they could to fight against the thing. So he learned early on that like it's not everyone, but it is the most sort of powerful end of the voice. And so, but it wasn't the definition for him. And I think it was similar with my mom. You know, my grandmother, especially. My mom came here younger, but my grandmother was the same way, coming from Haiti. She was just happy to be here, and she loved like sharing her culture and making food for people and teaching them about Haiti. Um, and she loved like learning about the other immigrants families in our neighborhood and like stirring the pot. Like that's just how I got to grow up as a kid before I moved from New York to New England and then the West Coast, where I suddenly didn't have access to a bunch of people who thought that way.
Really? Right. Do you notice the difference?
Oh, definitively such. When I moved, especially like when I moved from New York to New England, like to Massachusetts, it was much different. It was very white, and the immigrant populations in those places were people who identified as white, and it was actually really it was funny to listen to them like talk shit on each other, like Portuguese people and Italian, etc. Like, wow, that's crazy. um, and then when I moved to California, like everybody was white, and it was a utopia. It was like I moved to Southern California beach culture in the '80s, which was super white and super blonde hair and blue eyes, and like we don't have a care in the world, and everybody wants to be us. And here I come, like I was there were I was in a school of like 2,000 plus kids when I got to my high school. Two of those other kids looked like me in the entire school, and people had no knowledge of anything other than where they lived. Most people were not they weren't well traveled, and they weren't doing anything in their schools to sort of educate about culture, like the investigation of culture and celebration of the diversity of our planet, let alone like our country, was just not something that people were talking about, and that's which was the exact opposite of how I grew up. Like I grew up being taught to be curious, and here's why, and here's the different foods that we're going to eat, and here's what makes all of these people special. That was just part of how I was raised, and it was also part of how I grew up, even within our education system as a kid in the '70s and '80s in New York City.
So how did you balance that very probably obvious need to want to fit in as a new place with also that presumably voracious curiosity that was part of you? Because every kid has that. Whatever group, whatever whoever you are in the world, you've got. Oh, I'm not. I don't want to be different. Don't let them know I'm different. But you have to try and protect your own personality, but also try and be part of the group. It's just, I mean, it's humans as well, but it's particularly acute when you're a kid. It sounds like that was probably quite difficult. So how did you cope with that?
Well, I did everything I could to try to fit in immediately. I wanted to, not even fit in. I wanted to get accepted. I mean, you're 16. It's super formative. You're still trying to get a sense of yourself. You're making this investigation into manhood. Hormones are going crazy, etc. Like, so you get to a place and you're like, okay, how do I get like these guys to think I'm cool and those cute girls over there to think I'm cute? And it turned out that surfing was that thing for me. That's what all the kids did. It was what my community really revolved around as far as a lifestyle and culture. It was it was like the arts almost. It was what was generationally passed down. And as soon as I started surfing and got in the ocean, I caught the reason. Like I, at a soul level, like, oh, this is more than just a thing that you do. This is something that like fuels your being, and I want to do everything I can to build relationship with this thing. So initially, it was like, oh, that's what everyone does here. I've seen this. It looks cool. I want to be a part of that. But then I did it, and it was like, I want to I want to get to know this part of me as a person. I'm in. And I think that it confused a lot of the kids that I went to school with and grew up with. Um, they kids would literally say to me like, "You're a different kind of black guy." because you're more like us, because you do what we do. That's cool. Like, we're down for that because you're not like the black people we see on television or on MTV, like pat on the back, or you meet a girl, you see a girl in school that you like, and you go up to her friend and you're like, "Hey, what's up with your friend, such and such?" "Oh, really? You think she's cute?" "Yeah, she's cute." "All right, well, let me talk to her. I mean, I got to see if she's into black eyes first, of course, but I'll get back to you." And that was just a part of like your normal shit as a teenager, and you're just left standing there like, huh? Um, so yeah, it was a very very interesting dance, and I gave up a lot of myself for a few years to fit in and think each time, well, now they're going to finally accept me or see me. And then I got to a certain point where I realized, like, oh, they're never going to understand you and what makes you different. And they're sure as hell not going to accept you because they don't even know how to see you. So stop trying to please everybody and just do you.
Did that drive you in certain ways? That realization? Because obviously, I look at your success. I'm going to say ambition, which is quite a presumptuous word to use on my part, but I'm kind of thinking that somebody who's achieved what you've achieved across so many different levels must have an element of ambition in their character. And drive is obviously something that you clearly possess. Um, so, do you think those parts of you were catalyzed by this conflict that you're describing?
I think they were definitely catalyzed. But I think for me, it was less ambition and more like belief that my dreams, like the ability to like maximize the things that I loved, were a possibility. I mean, I just never
That's a
wanted.
that's a good ambition.
Yeah, I guess. I guess if that was my ambition, like that was what it
Yeah,
was.
that's kind of mine as well. How can I do this more often?
Yeah. How could how could how could I avoid what I saw was the trappings of my friends who were coming home from college, getting jobs, getting married, getting nest eggs that their parents had been saving for them, only on the condition that they got married, maybe got a house, etc., etc., and then seeing what happened to them and how they aged young. They aged quickly and they aged young, and the joy seemed to be minimal, and the most fun they seemed to be having was when I saw them at the bar. And I was like, yeah, that's not for me. The idea, like, I was terrified of even that level of responsibility. Like when your friends start getting married, some of them in their first wave in their early 20s, and I was just like, what? I not for me. So yeah, it was about how do I stay close to this thing? This is what gives me joy. And I got lucky enough to get an opportunity where I got a job. My initial first job that sort of changed everything was at Transworld Snowboarding and Skateboarding magazine, just as an intern and receptionist. But it was like, oh, you mean I'm not going to get fired because I want to surf in the morning before work, or if work real hard this week and we all go snowboarding on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Like everybody's into that, and you guys all have lives and professions, and oh, you're in marketing and you're a writer and you're an editor and you're a photographer and there was like a whole new landscape of my people. And I just threw myself headfirst in. I was like, okay, I don't know where I fit in here, but I know that I'm just as passionate about this thing, if not more so than everybody else here. And I'm going to prove to them that I belong and that I deserve some opportunities. And that's what I did.
Amazing. I got a quick geeky question on that. Did the interns get to write angry interns?
the interns did get to write angry interns, but the specifically the writing, the editorial interns got to. So I was friends with them. Like I skated with them and hung out with them. But it was a very prestigious thing to be a part of the angry interns. So I was just I was always like stoked to be like, yeah, well, I know them. I'm friends with them. They're like, well, you know the angry interns? I'm like, yeah, I can't tell you who they are, but I know them. Those are my friends. And it was a blast.
So that's how it started. So
Yeah.
that's how. And did you? So at that point, were you thinking you were grabbing that? You were thinking like, yeah, I'm going to try and see if I can make this a longer term lifestyle slash. I'm not going to say job because I don't think at that age anyone starts it thinking like, hey, I'm going to make this a career. You just kind of like, right, what's the next opportunity, aren't you? Like, how can I, like what can I do to sort of take this the next step forward, right?
It was it was about survival for the first few years. It was about like keeping the lights on, paying the bills, and getting to continue to like supply the habit, which was like shredding, like how to continue to surf, how to snowboard, and how to skate as much as possible, and still pay my bills. Um, and so whenever a little door did open, and I thought I could fit in there. Sometimes it wasn't even a door. Sometimes it was like a window that was kind of like cracked open, and there was a breeze. I'd be like, "Ooh, let me see. How do I fit in there?" So that leads to you know I was on the phones at Transworld, and I was doing some phone sales as well, and then I get a job at Planet Earth. Planet Earth Skateboards is looking for a phone sales rep, and I go and interview with Chris Miller, like sitting in Chris Miller's office. You know, the photo of him doing the indie at Upland by Grant Britton is behind him, and I'm sitting there in the desk, just like trying not to look him in the eye because I can't believe I'm in audience with him. But he ends up being as humble and down to earth as possible, and turns out that he's really loves to surf, and no one else at the company likes to surf like he does. And I'm like, well, I'm a super surfer, and we build our friendship, and I get a job answering the phones there. And now I'm surfing before work with Chris Miller every day, and then going on the phones and calling up shops on the East Coast and trying to sell them Planet Earth skateboards and clothing. And then he, I took him snowboarding for his first time, and he was blown away and took to it really, really well. And he said he wanted to develop snowboarding outerwear. I had all the relationships, and so I helped him put together the snowboarding team. And I got Dave Lee to come ride for Planet Earth and Blaze Rosenthal, and we got to work in, on Planet Earth outerwear, and I got to be the lead sales guy on that project, as well as like help run the team. And that just came from the 3 years that I'd put in at Transworld beforehand. So it was these little doors that I'd see, and that during the time where I was just quote unquote trying to survive and stay alive and do the thing, you get to a certain point where you look in briefly in the rearview mirror, you're like, oh, I've actually acquired some skill sets here that would work there. Like, let me go for that thing. I think I could. Let me see if I can sneak into that door. And that's consecutively what it was.
Do you remember a point when you thought, and maybe that point's still not come, but where you thought, actually, I don't need to get a normal job. This is actually what I'm doing now.
Ah, I still have, I still have the same mindset as in how I'm approaching my life today. Um, I take stock of what I've learned over the past few, and where I might be able to apply it in a certain direction. And now that comes with obviously, you know, 20 years of broadcasting and some journalism, etc. Um, and it really is continues to what it's none of how do I none of it has been aspirational to the point where like I'm gonna get to that place and do that thing. Um, it's just made sense at the time based on what I've been doing, like which is even like getting on camera, and becoming a commentator. I was just the guy who would you'd be at a shop demo, a skate demo, or at a snowboard contest or a surf contest on the beach or whatever, or a trade show, and people would take turns on the microphone. And I love to talk shit, so I would like I slid in and would get on the mic just so that I could like win the crowd. And then people would be like, "Hey, you're good at that. You should come to our thing." Or, "We heard that you killed it at this demo. Do you want to come to our demo and we'll give you like $100 store credit?" Um, or, "My friend's got this little show. They're looking for someone to interview somebody. You should do it." Like, not getting paid for it, but like, yeah, that's where I want to be anyway. I want to be at the thing. And so if I got this little way to slide in and be at the thing, then cool. And little did I know that I was acquiring skills that would lead to someone on Madison Avenue deciding, hey, there's these this huge source of untapped um, money coming from this group of youth in America that are like slowly, like they're low key influencing what culture is. Like, let's everyone go after that. And thus, extreme everything begins, X Games, etc. I just happened to be in the right time from being in the industry and also spending some time at on the mic that when I got my opportunity, when I got my shot to be in front of the camera, I wasn't good at it. I did, but I was enthusiastic and I knew how to learn on the fly. And that's what I'm still doing.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that what you just described really perfectly actually, because I think I always call these episodes where we talk about this like the lifer episodes of the show. Like, and it's the common theme. Everyone's making it up. Everyone's kind of, the goal is always like, how can I ride more? It's just always is. Like whoever it is, whatever the background, whatever the position now, everybody started there. Everybody followed these little opportunities. No one knew what they were doing, and you had to make it up as you went along. And suddenly, you've got a sort of career, and you can ride more. And that was the thing, wasn't it? That's what you were trying to do. Um, and you got to be ready to make a bit of a dick of yourself at points, like as everybody does in all walks of life. You got to learn, you got to make mistakes, and you got to not be worried about that if possible, and just keep trucking through, right?
You got to fail a lot. You got to fail like a lot. And I feel like I I definitely failed a lot. I got fired from or laid off from lots of places. Almost left the industry 5 or 6 times where I was just like, "That's it, I'm done. There's no way anyone's gonna hire me," um, and just hustled. But I was out on my ass from the industry countless times. But and I would try and go get real jobs, and I'd just be like, "Fuck it, man. I'm throw myself back into the scrum. Like I'm gonna figure out a way how to get back in there because that's what makes me happy. Being having that access to continue to do the thing that I love, and I'm so grateful for it. And honestly, like I cannot believe that here we are, 25 years later, and that I'm still very very much here, still very much here, getting to do it with as much access as I had then, if not more.
Yeah. Well, it's about a month ago you put the thing on Insta about the fact you're now on the Burton board of directors, right? I mean that must have felt like quite quite a milestone.
I laugh only because of it's an absurd statement. It feels absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. You
It,
know,
it
what
feels
an achievement.
it feels absurd to me that the guy who answered the phones at Transworld for $6 an hour is now gets to sit on the board of the the biggest company brand in the culture. The brand that basically like defines the culture. Um, it's been super humbling. Jake was a Jake Burton was a very good friend, had become a friend, and really had become a mentor. He became someone who, because of him choosing to see me, like see the whole me, um, he helped legitimize me in places where, and spaces that people maybe had just thought of me only as like a person who talked. You know what I mean? He was one of those people who saw what I had to give, and that my passion was also about like having good ideas about what our culture really is, and that's how he engaged with me. And but I never there's just no way on earth that I ever would have thought I would have been presented with this opportunity. I mean, especially to lose him in the manner that we did a year and a half ago, and then to have the year that we've had, and like you said earlier, like this global civil rights movement that we've experienced and bathed in, and ended up shedding a halogen spotlight, blacklight almost, on any and all spaces that may be experiencing imbalance or inequity or lacked inclusion, etc. And suddenly people started having these bigger conversations about what that looked like. And when I got the call from Jake's son George and Donna Carpenter, his widow, to ask if I would join the board, they said this is what Jake would have wanted, and we feel that the time has never been more ripe than now, and we would like to offer you a seat at the table. Do I think that my career, the last 25 years, do I think that I've earned this position? Yes. Do I think that it would have happened this year without those things taking place that we just described and what we've been through as a society? I don't think so. And for that, I'm extra grateful. Um, I'm extra grateful. Like when I think about, and this might sound strange, but when I think about someone like this man George Floyd, who the whole world had to see as a human being, that on any other given day would have walked by and thought, "What a piece of shit! What a person whose life is wasted, etc." If they'd seen him in any of the ways that people try to describe him, like, "Oh well, he was this, he struggled with drugs, or he was whatever," all these things to make him less of a human being. That unfortunately, seeing his life taken away from him in this very in this 8 minute and 46-second arc, that's the only way that a person like his life suddenly actually became equal to other people's, was seeing it extinguished, and in turn caused a wide swath of people who normally wouldn't have. It caused them to suddenly access a part of themselves to recognize the faults in our landscape that we discussed earlier. And that reverberated through an industry like the action sports industry that prior to this time had done a very, very good job of thinking of itself as immune to the conversation, thinking that because we are so built in stoke and life experience and joy and like the camaraderie of the shred that there couldn't possibly be any blind spots where, hey, by the way, this thing for the most part is built to exclude others, whether you like it or not. um, I don't think that that happens in our industry, in this industry, the way that it's happening without that taking place. And that's just, it's just raw, and it's humbling. It's like, it's really like, that's how I look at this. I look at this opportunity as being hopefully the first of many different people from many different hues and many different walks of life that get to contribute to the direction uh, and to the expansion of what our landscape looks like. Um, and it's so it is, as much as I'm excited about it, it's a lot bigger than me. Um, and I'm excited, but I'm also I'm humbled to have this opportunity, because I know that it doesn't happen right now without that.
How's it been for you personally this last year? Because obviously you've been given whether whether you liked it or not, this kind of spokesperson figurehead role in our industry about what's the things we've been talking about. Um, how's that been?
It's been tough, man. It's I have no desire to be. I don't wake up in the morning and go like, ah, I'm so excited to be the spokesperson for race and inequality and injustice with within our industry. I want to talk about shredding. I want to talk about like great swells and all the different things. The different talent that's emerging around the world. I want to talk about the culture. For the most part, that's what I want to do. I want to talk about doing the thing and experiencing the thing.
Well,
But
like everyone.
like everyone, just like everyone, it's I want this thing to be what it is for everyone else, which is a place to leave everything else behind.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way. That's a great way of putting it because, and as you said, like the the layers of privilege that have revealed are pretty horrifying as well. Because most like no white people have ever had to consider what we do through that lens ever until 6 months ago, and that's and obviously. I guess the other thing that struck me about the sort of role that's been thrust upon you as well is like there's a lot of please teach us. There's that subtext going on, isn't there? There's like the please help us understand and what we need to do. And I just wonder if that is aggravating at points because it's a bit like it's almost like again putting more pressure on you to provide answers to solutions that are to problems that are everybody's problems, whether they're aware of them or not.
If I wish sometimes that I'd saved all the text messages and emails um, that I got in the wake of George Floyd in that next month or 2 months, and phone calls and people being like, "Hey, I just wanted to pick your brain and I want to talk about this. Help me to understand." And then at a certain point, quickly, I just be like, "I can't help you to understand. I need you to like open Google, ask it those questions,
Read a book.
read some shit. Here's a movie you can watch. And then at some point we can have a discussion based on like what you've learned. But like if you think I'm gonna be here to like teach you this shit, I'm sorry, I can't." And I at a certain point, within those first couple of weeks, and it was not just me; it was all Black people with white friends found themselves in this position. It was crazy. I was having this conversation with so many friends, and not just in our industry, but you're trying to deal with the grief and trauma of how these things affect you as a Black person, as it affects any marginalized people. When something happens to one of them, it happens to all of them. In this case, we're talking about Black people, but it stretches across the landscape of marginalized peoples from within the LGBTQ plus sector. Muslim, Latin culture. I mean, endless. Like, that's just what it is. And if you're not a marginalized person, it's very hard for people to comprehend. Like, what do you mean that happening there makes you feel a certain way, and that you, well, because I've been through that, or I've had a look at what that could be, and now you're witnessing something that you actually have knowledge of. I think people were very surprised when I would do talks, and I've done a lot of talks um, to various aspects of the industry. Surf culture, surfing industry, snowboarding industry. These big, sort of bigger Zoom calls to have these conversations, and then you tell people your personal experiences and how close you've been to being a statistic, or the different types of racism that you've experienced within the industry during the come up, and they're just like, they're in shock, they're slack-jawed, because they really have thought like, well, there's no way this exists, or that I've wait, you're saying that I've actually been a part of perpetuating it, because I didn't have any, I was unaware. um, and I'm I am pleasantly surprised at the manner in which a certain sector within our industry has made it their choice that building inclusion and anti-racism into the culture of what their brands are, and the culture of who they are as brands, that has become their goal. Not I've been surprised at the amount of people who don't just want to check a box, but who actually want that are learning that, hey, this choice is actually a lifelong choice. That if I'm going to be this way, then this is the person I need to be on a regular basis, and this is the manner in which I need to adjust my lens prescription for how I see the world, and in turn how it affects the way I'm building culture within my brands. And that part that part gives me hope, that because for I think there are a lot of people who just thought like, well, this is just virtue signaling, etc., etc. And I would say to them like, well, was like removing sexually predatory nature and sexual harassment from your brand culture, was that just ticking a box, or has that provided a more stable, more fruitful, better culture within your brands? Where And they're like, well, yeah, well, that's this, just another version of that. I think it was easier for people to see it through that, through the sexual identity lens, because there's still an act of like someone doing something to someone else that they're all familiar with. But I think it's taken a little longer for people to realize that like certain types of behavior, or blind spots in the way people talk and think, is actually doing something to someone else that makes them being there harder. It's harder for them to exist within that circle. And I do have hope, and in turn, like, as much as I don't, that's not what I want to wake up and do every day. I will step up to the plate and work where I can in a way that can be of aid if people want to work with me. But it's in a manner of exchange. It's not like I'm here to give. if we're going to do that, it's going to be in professional exchange.
Well, I got one final question to wrap it up, if that's all right, and it's to bring it back to the wider themes that we were talking about earlier, because essentially what we were talking about earlier was it's gonna sound really banal, like, but light and dark, like whether people are basically completely horrible, cynical bastards who just want to hurt each other, or basically whether such a thing as a community is possible. A bit of a classic debate. And what do you think now? Obviously you talked about your parents. Sounds like your parents, pretty obvious where your parents stood. But you've experienced both sides of human nature through your life, like we all have. And we talked about the administrations and about how they've really weaponized the worst parts of human nature. And that's been horrifying. These are kind of the themes we've been discussing. So when you look at it in that context, if we kind of zoom it out, how do you feel about that now? What's your take? Do you feel like it's? I'm not going to ask the same question I asked earlier, but in these framing it in this way, what how are you currently feeling about that?
It's work. Change is work, and in the building of anything, sometimes you do what you can, and then you pass along those tools to someone else, and they continue it on. Um, and it's work. It's legacy work. So I I think that I am hopeful because I see people doing the work, and I see some active change taking place. And yes, the I think it's working because of the exact reasons that you just mentioned. The manners in which the powers that be are working overtime and double time to to weaponize um, to weaponize against progress. That lets me know that something we're doing something right, and that we as I think that our human nature um, is best steeped in an idea of uh, equity and and common ground. Call me cheesy or whatever. Like the cynics would probably be like, but I that's how I believe, and so I will continue to do what little I can to throw some seasoning in this big old gumbo that we're making. But like sitting by and being hopeless and being angry is exhausting, and I ain't giving people that energy. Like I'm not going to deplete my storehouse out of just seeing the fucked upness in the world and the people who want to perpetuate that. So we continue and we move on, and we really actively celebrate every day, because I do think it is magical to be here, even especially in this time, and to be able to like think about what 40 years from now might look like if goodness wins. I'm here to find out what that might be.
Thanks so much, man. That was great. Really enjoyed that.
I've really enjoyed it as well, man. I really appreciate being able to get into the marrow a bit.
Yeah, it was really, really fascinating. Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't do it in person, really. One day. All right, it's Matt. So hold that thought. So we recorded this episode, I think it was 2 days before what happened at the Capitol in Washington. And obviously, I thought it would be great to get Selema's thoughts on that. So what I did is I asked him to record me a little postscript and send me that, which is what he did. So here it is. Nice one.
What can I say about the storming of the Capitol? Shit. I mean, I'm not shocked. I was surprised at the scale of it in the moment. And it was really, really hard to watch because you felt it. It felt like the Capitol was more of a metaphor of like the storming of the consciousness of America. That's how I looked at it. Like, yeah, okay, they're going in there to literally try and overthrow or stop an election from being certified, and they're carrying fucking Trump flags and beating people with American flags and having the audacity to carry the racist Confederate flag through the halls, and all of that was, and just the rabid like look of hate and anger and a dark collective passion for this lie and for this idea that a democracy doesn't work. It's only a democracy if your side wins. That part was all crazy to watch in real time, but and just the overwhelming and decided just racist energy. Even though, yes, there were people there of other races, but I'm like, you have to self-hate yourself immensely to decide that that's what you want to run with. But that's another conversation. But again, at the end of the day, for me, it just felt like what it felt like, as opposed to just what I was seeing or what was happening on paper. It just felt like an assault and a challenge for the definition of what our collective conscious energy is going to be in this country. And there were people who really thought that by going in there and standing for this fascist wannabe shit dictator in Donald Trump, that they were engaged in some sort of righteousness. I do think that there were a bunch of people in there who thought that they were engaging in something, that their hate is actually righteous. That's the part that, like, whew, that shit really fucked me up. And it was just, I think for a lot of people woke up to like, oh, you can make jokes all you want about QAnon and the Proud Boys and how absurd, in reality, how absurd what they believe and stand for is relative to where we are in this part of the century, in this part of humanity. But as absurd and amusing as it might be to look at from the outside in, like, there ain't nothing funny about this shit. This shit is meant. This is what the end result is of people bathing in conspiracy and in bathing in information and news that allows them to believe what they want to believe as opposed to what is true. Like that, at the end of the day, it was what it was for me. Like, oh, this is what happens when you have a landscape that allows people to just, believe in what they want to believe as opposed to what is true. And then literally want to mandate that like everyone else should believe this shit that like makes me feel good, whether it's true or not. I was also struck by the difference in tone collectively at a societal level, like within our like the culture reaction here in America of people immediately wanting to feel sorry for these people who made the active choice. Like, they made the choice to get on planes and hope within their collective energy that they were going to like overthrow and change the course of a system that we all agree on, like in democracy. And they felt justified and righteous in doing so, and many of them were willing to do whatever it took when it came to, you know, there were people who were there for bodies. They decidedly wanted to kidnap, hang, abuse, kill members of the Senate and of the Congress, maybe even the vice president, to get their way. They were beating people with the American flag. They killed a police officer. 5 people died. They ransacked the Capitol of the Capitol building, which is supposed to be like this sanctified place when it comes to what the definition of America, what America stands for. They didn't like fuck up a Target or some other business. Like, they stepped all over and destroyed the thing that you're supposed to hold dear. And then I just was really, really blown away by the manner in which people were like, well, yes, that happened, but we should use it as a sign to believe, to reach out and find healing. Let's pretend like that didn't happen and let's talk about healing. And, when it comes to what we've experienced with Black Lives Matter, like, nobody was willing to say, hey, let's actually. No one was saying, hey, let's figure out what's going on and how can we find some healing. People were like, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization and these are all thugs, and, immediately went into like all lives matter and blue lives matter, and a line was drawn in the sand for a very loud minority in this country. There's absolutely no way that you're going to get me to listen or to sympathize with any of it. I don't believe in it, in what you guys are talking about, and all those people should be arrested and or worse. And an insurrection is performed. A seditious insurrection is performed in the Capitol building, a building that stands for democracy and what the democracy is supposed to be. And those people got on planes and went back to their hotels and got on planes and were served and went home. Obviously, some got put on no-fly lists, and now, arrests are being made. But like, immediately you watch the television and people are talking about, well, we need to figure out why these people did this. Let's try and understand them. 74 million people. We have to think about them. We have to think about the people who lost and, figure out how to make peace with them.
No, we don't. No, we don't. That's not how democracy works. You have an election, you have a winner, and that person gets to institute ideas and, put together some plans that may or may not work that guide what the next 4 years looks like. And if you have a problem with that, and you have a problem with what they're doing, and you criticize them, you hold their feet to the fire, you organize, you protest peacefully, and you figure out how to get a candidate up there that is going to stand for what you believe in or what you would like to see. But you don't get to change the outcome of the game because you don't look like what it looks like on the scoreboard. At the end of a football game, you don't look up. No one's looking at the scoreboard and be like, "What did we?" Yes, my team scored 2 points. What do they get? Nothing, because the other team scored 4. You thank them for a good game and you see them back on the pitch with the same rules sometime in the future. And your team's going to figure out what they can do better so that they can be the victor the next time. But you don't get to go and storm the stadium and change the scoreboard. That's not how it works. No one says, hey, but that team lost. And they look over there, they're sad. We should figure out a way to make them feel like they won. That's not how life works. But for some reason, in this country, when it comes to ideas that are rooted in white supremacy and white nationalism, everybody wants to be like, well, we need to understand them. Let's find a way to make unity with them, make peace with them. And those people usually end up finding ways to enact in more bullshit because they never get their feet held to the fire. It literally is like the definition of white privilege in America. Because if that had been a majority black, majority brown people who decided to storm the Capitol building, the steps of that building would have been drenched in blood. And they sure as hell would not have been able to walk out afterwards or be helped down the stairs and go back to their hotels to celebrate and have beers and get back on planes and go home to high-five their families. It's sad that it happened. But at the same time, I hope that it causes some level of awakening within people of how far we have to go to actually be a country whose conscience is one of that desires equity. And it was just a reminder to me that, like, this country doesn't desire equity, doesn't desire equality. And a small but loud and inherently powerful group of people will do everything they can and spend the entirety of their energy and their lives to accumulate power and fight against progress. Do everything they can to turn back the hands of time to make people feel like yesterday was better than tomorrow. Those are my thoughts.
So there you go. That was me and Selema, and what a brilliant mind, like I said, and what a fantastic conversation. As you could probably tell, I very much enjoyed that episode, and I'm really grateful for Selema and Amador for all the help in bringing that one to fruition. If you're of a mind to find out more about him, Instagram would be the best place to start. Make sure you subscribe to his podcast, What Shapes Us, as well, which is also really great. And while you're over at Instagram, why not follow me over at We Look Sideways and give this episode a share so more people can hear it. Go on, couple of clicks, done. Big thanks if you decided to do that. All right, so housekeeping corner. Gotta say, I'm really gratified by how many people seem to be enjoying these little diversions at the end of the show. I've had people asking for housekeeping corner merch, and somebody the other day described it like the secret track at the end of the album. You're old, I can tell. It's worth sticking around for. Anyway, if you are still here and listening, that makes you one of the diehards. I'm very grateful for it, and as usual, thank fuck the rest of them have gone, eh? While I'm chatting about listeners, I just want to give a big shout out to listener Simon Joyson, who's been undertaking the Herculean task of listening to every single episode of the podcast in sequence since he discovered it last year. Simon first got in touch to tell me this at the time, and I've got to be honest, I thought he was taking the piss. I mean, that is literally thousands of hours of listening. But it appears he's heroically stuck to his task, messaging me at the time of recording this episode to report that he's made his way to episode 139, which means at this rate it's going to be a few weeks before he listens to this episode. But here's a little Easter egg for you, Simon, and if you're listening, well, I salute you. Thanks for the dedication. Had a pretty busy few weeks myself, actually. I mentioned this elsewhere and also on Instagram, but I've been working on the latest volume of Curator magazine, an independent snowboarding publication published by my friend Tassilo Hagar. Is that how you say it? Sorry, Taz. Anyway, he brought me in to act as editor last year, and we did it again this year. We worked together with a few other people pulling this whole thing together, and what an absolute privilege that has been. We've just sent the thing to print. It should be out in a couple of weeks. It features stories with Gimbal God, Jamie Lynn, Cersei Wallace, Sarka, Jeff Brushy, John Jackson. There's a retrospective on boarding for breast cancer. There's a piece with Matt George by Jerome Tanon. There's an interview with Ellen High. There's loads of stuff. There's loads more than that as well. We've worked our arse off on that, I've got to be honest, and I'm really proud of it. It's over 20 years since I edited my first snowboarding magazine, and if you told me back then that I'd still be doing it in 2021, I would have laughed you out of the place. Then again, if you'd have told me about the whole Donald Trump thing, I would have definitely laughed you out of the place. I will say though, one thing that hasn't changed in those 20 years is how absolutely slack as fuck professional snowboarders are at getting back to you when there's a deadline looming. So actually everyone, I'm going to say. So let's just say the next time there's a round of those heartfelt support print Instagram messages when the next round of magazines go bust, I'm not going to take them that seriously, to be honest. If you want to support print, answer your fucking emails when someone's chasing you to do pictures, text, or anything on deadline. That'd really help. Anyway, rant over, but please support independent action sports publishing by ordering a copy from curatorpublishing.com. Or if you prefer, Taz is actually going to do a discount for Looking Sideways listeners, which I'll be sending out with a future newsletter. To get that, you'll need to sign up via the link at my website, www.wearelookingsideways.com. And make sure you check your junk and trash for the opt-in link. It is absolutely staggering to me how many people don't do this after they sign up. Because you even get a thing that says make sure you check your spam and junk for the follow-up email. And then I still get people saying, oh, I'm not signed up to your newsletter. And I'm like, well, you didn't opt in. And they're like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, they do say people have short attention spans these days. But yeah, there you go. Anyway, if you want that curator discount link, newsletter, opt-in, junk, spam mail, have a look. All of this means that the Looking Sideways book has been put back a few weeks. But who's in a rush? I mean, we can't leave our houses for the next 2 months. And I think a spring release is going to be perfect for this one. So it'll be finished when it's finished. Let's put it that way. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with another one. Nice one.